Gray Grant.
Howdy. Hi.
Hello. That is a pretty dope name, if I'm being honest with you.
Thank
Is that
you.
your
I
given
like it.
name?
That is it is a name that I gave myself back a while. I am a trans identified person. And it came from I'm a composer. Things to know to like really get the name backstory of the
Hit
name.
the bullets so that we know what's
let's hit
happening.
yeah, I'm a composer. I got a lot of composing degrees, but that doesn't matter. Anyone can do it. And I like theater. I like writing for the theater. I like writing for opera, but I usually am not writing for operatic voices. We can get into that later. Anyway, first opera attempt at like an operatic project. I was writing like a trans non-binary character whose name was Gray. And that project fell through. But then when I was like, I don't like what my name is, I landed on Gray as like the new thing. So that is my name. That is my name. But I got it from a character that I created. So
Do you mind if I ask you what your name was before you changed it? Does that bother
I
you?
do. I keep that private just because
Okay.
it's kind of irrelevant at this
Sure.
point.
No
Yeah.
problem. No problem at all. I like Gray Grant. I am a big fan of the alliteration. As a comic book fan, I've always found that that's a go-to
Yeah.
with a pretty
Yeah.
consistently good story. Is that alliterative
Yeah, I
name?
thought it sounded really nice when I came up with it. I thought it would like, I mean, as being an artist, like one, I wanted as a non-binary person, I wanted a sense of like happiness and like sense of like calmness in myself. But like also as an artist, I was like, ooh, this name is great. It's a good artist name.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Let me ask you just up front because I want to make sure that that we're on the same page about where this conversation is going. Because you brought it up more than once, how comfortable are you talking about your identity as a trans person, a non-binary person? Do you want to kind of sidestep that and not discuss it, or are you cool?
I mean, maybe
Because
talk a
I
little
can be
about it.
curious sometimes.
Yeah, we can talk about it, and then if there are things that I'm like, I don't want to answer that, then I'll just say that, and it'll be
And
fine.
I have no problem with that answer. Here's some acceptable answers some people don't want to give to me in all areas of discussion. I don't know. I'm fine with that. Why would that be a problem? I don't want to talk about it. Sounds fucking great. Let's talk about something else. Don't even worry about it.
Yeah.
Cool. Just if it comes up. Again, it's not like an agenda-based show, so I don't know. But I want to make sure I don't step on any toes or make anyone uncomfortable.
You're so good.
So with that being said, let's go back. I'll ask you my first question, which is my only stock question. Where are you from, Gray?
Yeah. Great. So I was born and raised in the sense of where are you from? Born and raised in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Which is why I have such a connection with UNCSA. But then I moved up to Michigan, which is where I currently live, to go to school. I went to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. I had after my undergrad degree, I had a brief stint in New York. I was going to go to a school which will remain unnamed just because, reasons. And then about a weekend, I dropped out because it wasn't the vibe and it was too expensive and I wasn't getting the funding that I wanted.
Can I ask what was off about the vibe?
Oh, it was just there was everything was a little messy. Classes that were, said that they were one thing. I showed up and they were a different thing. Or it turns out they weren't going to fulfill the degree requirement that they were supposed to fulfill on paper. I showed
We
up
don't have to dig into too much detail if you don't want to, but I'm curious.
Yeah.
How does that occur as far as your investigation of the school up front and wanting to go there? And then what is maybe one example of it, a specific expectation where you're like, I'm here for this. And this is not what I was promised or told, or you didn't ask.
I mean, honestly, when I was coming out of my undergrad, I wanted to do more school. At some point, I wanted to take a year and then to do more school. And so I was took a year. And I was pretty unhappy with my job, and I was ready to go back to school and find a way to be more connected with my creative life. And so I just was kind of I cast a wide net. No, I didn't cast a wide net. I applied to 3 schools. I applied
to 3 schools. Net.
Yeah, a medium net. And one school, yeah, anyway, the school that I chose, I thought was going to be great. And then I just like showed up and for just like every single little tiny, minute, not worth mentioning thing along the way, just something went wrong that felt like a red flag. So
It
I
just
like,
seems like the reason I prod a
yeah,
little is just because
yeah,
it
yeah,
seems like such a quick time to make that up. Like
yeah. Well,
it
and
wasn't like 3 months in after spending a bunch of
no,
time. It was like you felt almost like when someone walks into a haunted house and they're like, no,
it was
this
pretty.
is
Well,
not right.
there was a lot of like pre-semester like organizational stuff that also was like not a thing. Like
Oh,
no one
okay. So
ever,
you kind of got
like
a
it was
whiff
like,
of it.
yeah, it was just there was like a massive lack of communication from like the chair of the department to like incoming students. I just like no one ever sent me like a form to like fill out to like give teacher preferences for like private study, which is a thing that you do in the world of composition in the
Okay.
academic world. Um, it just was kind of it was a kind of organizational nightmare, which is sad because there were some really cool people there. But regardless, I dropped out after like a lot of crying in Washington Square Park and a lot of just like being on a lot of intense phone calls with people giving me advice. But I stayed because I like signed a lease. And my roommate got me into like like a choir in the city. I also sing. Um, and so I was like, all right, I'll stick around for a year because New York is New York, and there are lots of things to do here. And it
Sure.
was great. There was lots of things to do. I like sang at like the Coke Theater in a production of what was the ballet? The Ravel Ballet. Daphnis and Chloe. It was like massive. It's a massive ballet with like a giant chorus in it, and the music is so gorgeous that often I think the choreo. Sorry to the classical ballet dancers out there, but often I think all the choreo that I've seen out there for Peleas kind of pales in comparison to the music. So like the
Mm.
productions are always a little lackluster. It's also why this piece in particular gets like played in like a concertized version. But yeah, I like did really cool stuff like that. I like directed and did some dramaturgy for like my friend's experimental like no plot opera, which
Sure.
is
Hopped
great because
around and
yeah,
soaked
yeah,
in New York City for a year
it was
before you
yeah,
went
it
to
was great.
Michigan.
Yeah, and then I like came back. I came back to Michigan after that year because I had a friend who I like had a gig in Michigan. And when I came back, we were chatting, and he mentioned that he was going to like live in a farmhouse, in the next year, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And then like when I was back in New York, he texted me saying, hey, do you want to live in the farmhouse? And I was like, all right, great, cool, why not? And so I moved back one because the farmhouse was such a like a kind of a it was like I was really appealing to my like romanticized like need for like nature, which I didn't have in Michigan. I'm a big nature kiddo. I love hiking. Michigan has the Upper Peninsula and Lake Superior and the Pitched Rocks, which are just massive like 200 300 cliffs along Lake Superior. It's really great. And I also like had a community here that I was like deeply missing. So
Let
I
me
moved
make
back to
sure I get
Michigan
the
for that.
timeline right
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
So when was the
yeah.
first time you ever went to Michigan?
I went to Michigan for my undergraduate degree, um, 2012 to 2016. New York was 2017 to 2018, and then I've been back
Got
ever
it. So you
since.
went
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
straight from Winston to Michigan
yeah,
and then to New York, and then you decided I actually really like being in
yeah,
Michigan. Let me go back.
yeah.
All
I
right.
like the small town vibe. I like
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just the
No,
speed
you
to
don't
me
have to
makes
talk me
sense.
into that. I live in LA, but I absolutely
uh,
have lived in a lot of
yeah.
small towns. I love that vibe.
Mm-hmm.
Let me back up a little bit so that I can get some perspective here. So
Oh
you
yeah.
grew up in Winston. Can we talk
Mm-hmm.
parents? What are your parents
Yeah.
doing for work,
Great.
and you getting along well with them as a kid?
Yeah. They're lovely. Yeah. I just saw my parents. They came up for a premiere that I did, and they're great. My dad's like a he's like an IT girly. He's not a girly, but he's an IT girly. He works on servers. He does cybersecurity, things
Okay.
that I don't know about. He was like a rural North Carolina kid who managed to get like classic Doctor Who somehow on his television.
Okay.
And like was a band kid.
Nerd
And then my
dad.
mom,
I say
yeah,
with love.
yeah, absolute nerd dad.
Great.
Just like saw like he went to see Star Wars the original like 17 times in the
Of
theaters when it
course.
came out
Yeah. All right.
before
Got
it
it.
was like a thing.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
my
He was in the
yeah
paper, I'm sure, for how many times he went to see Star Wars. Uh,
probably
Talk about what about mom? What's mom up
mom
to?
mom also grew up as like a rural kiddo in Winston Salem, but it was a part that is like now no longer rural. Is a part that is now like it went from like the classic like rural to suburban kind of like zoning type thing.
What city is
Um,
this, or what town is it? Where?
Winston,
Oh, you're talking
Winston.
about. Oh, okay. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
She grew up
Winston
in
was
Winston.
far more
Yeah,
rural, especially on the
yeah,
north side.
yeah. And she like went to school. She like my parents both went to Chapel Hill, and that's where they
Oh,
met.
okay.
And
Is that
she
where they
was
met?
going to
Got it.
yeah, she was going to be like an education person, but
Do
turns
you
out
mean teacher, or did you mean
as in
something
like a
else by that?
teacher. Yeah, as a teacher.
Okay.
She wanted to be a teacher, but school did not agree with her. So she,
Mm.
she was like a person who like did office jobs here and there. And then when she was a mother, she became a mother. But it's like she's super involved with their church. It's been her church her entire life. She's like very proudly now something that she's been gutting for several years, and then a few years ago finally is on. But she's like on the funeral committee, which is like a big deal to her, which I find
Got
really
it.
really cool. Also because I'm like a there's something out there, a concept out there called the good death, and there's like like death advocates, things like that. And I'm
Okay.
aligned with those people. The premiere that my parents just came up to see was a show about death. It was a show about like ritual and like culture and death in the U.S. And like I like talked about those things kind of vaguely while I was saying about them. And like while I
Mm-hmm.
was doing this, I was doing a home funeral on my partner, and that's like the show. So anyway, me and my mom love chatting about the funeral
Yeah.
committee.
You
Yeah, it's
sound a
cute.
little cagey about talking about this as if you're like worried that I'm going to judge you for being into
No,
death. Are you?
no. I just like have a my like kind of public persona. My interview public speaking persona is always like a little chaotic and a little bit up like fast. That's all.
No, I'm into it. I don't want you to get the impression I'm not into it. I'm just also kind
Yeah,
of an immediacy person that calls things out.
yeah.
No, I love that. When I was just, I'll give you a little context because I don't know how much of the show you've ever heard, so how much you know anything about me. But when I don't know if I've ever said this on the show actually. So nice. Might actually get to bring up a new thing. Rare. When I was like 20, I had a summer where I got really into researching like biographies of people. And I'd never really done that before just growing up. If they taught me something in school or, I learned something from a friend or maybe I watched a documentary, but I didn't go out of my way to like research people's stories. And I got into a few people that summer, Andy Kaufman, a few different people. I was like, I want to know everything that happened to them. One of the people I got into was Dr. Jack Kevorkian. And you know who that is?
No, I'm humming as if I do, but I am Googling this name right now.
Look it up. They called him Dr. Death.
Oh,
Um,
yes, that sounds familiar.
yeah, he is.
Yeah.
He was a very famous dude for a bunch of reasons. The main one for our listeners who may not Google it right away, the main one being that he was a death advocate. I mean, he was someone
Oh, yeah,
basically
yeah.
that if he was trying to help people find a way to accomplish assisted suicide, basically.
Yeah,
Um,
I do. I have read about this guy.
yeah,
He's a good one.
fascinating fella. And if you hear especially the stuff about his earlier life,
Mm,
everyone in his family is like, this kid wanted to know everything about death from the time he was a little kid. And it wasn't like a morbid, like he would kill stuff and he didn't say it was some sort of like, yeah, tell me, but like he was just constantly fascinated by it. It was like as if like
mm,
some kids get into nature. This kid
mm,
got into death. It was just his thing of like
mm,
wanting to understand why it happens, how it happens, when it happens, how people feel about it, all this kind of stuff. And I remember at the time I had a friend that I was hanging out with that summer, and they were like, what are you up to, dude? We might have been smoking a joint or something. And he was like, hey, what have you been up to? And I was like, man, I got a whole stony rant about, you know about this Dr. Death, Dr. Kevorkian dude. And I went on for way longer than I just did.
I
And
love
this
that.
guy was like, bro, are you good? Like, are you good? And I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, I'm fine. I was just learning about this guy.
Yeah.
To so many people, any interest in the subject is incredibly off-putting.
Yeah.
They
Well,
just
that's like,
instantly don't want to encounter it.
I mean, well, that's why and I say this with all sincerity. That's why, like, I talk about like death and cool death stuff often, because it is important to destigmatize it. One of the big problems that we have as like a culture in the United States is that uh, we have built ritual. At least I speak for like kind of like the white America, because there are like other death ritual practices and like
Sure.
within
You
like
mean more of the
the Black
Western
diaspora and things like that.
Americanized
Yes,
culture? Yeah.
exactly. But we have like rituals that are like really that are so formal and stoic and are super performance heavy for I guess the community around us. But it really kind of like shuts off like the kind of primary grieving individuals, like the people closest, more closely related to the dying person or the dead person. It shuts them off from like having a way to like confront their emotions, feel their emotions, which is a very important thing. If you've ever been to therapy, it's surely the only way out is through, and to like process your emotions. And also grief is like such a wild monster that happens in so many different ways. So we just like have made grief a thing that we kind of perform to get through it, and then we're kind of like left with like
Pieces.
fuck all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pardon.
No, fuck all is
Expletive.
absolutely correct.
Yeah.
What
Great.
when did this interest start for you, Gray?
Yeah. So there's a YouTuber out there that you should definitely check out who is
Great.
not just a YouTuber, but she is like a mortician and like good death advocate named Caitlin Doty, who has her YouTube channels called Ask a Mortician. It's been around for a long time.
I
She
love
also
that.
has like 3 books out. One's a memoir, one is about, which is incredible, Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. We're just now doing a segment on Caitlin Doty, and I love it. Her second book was about like death practices globally, which is like really nice and like a nice way of like putting death in perspective. And then the third book is like questions children ask about death, which is like really nice because often, kids will ask the most immediate and most sometimes confronting thing first because they don't have that filter. But yeah, Caitlin Doty, she's great. I kind of like watched her videos around and they're really lovely. And then I ended up getting commissioned to write a song cycle for this baritone named Elliot Franks, who lives in San Francisco, who is a lovely man and delightful. I was commissioned by a third party to write a song cycle for him. And we like got together. I was like, hello, this other party wants me to write a piece for you. Tell me about yourself. And Elliot, and one of the reasons why we got paired together is because we both like, I mean, I am like trans feminine. Elliot is like a trans mask guy, or he's a trans man. We got paired together for like kind of that shared experience. But I didn't want to necessarily write a piece about that because there are more things to write about than that. And Elliot, let's see, how can I condense this? And Elliot is like talked about this on like NPR. So it's like it's out there. He being trans.
I'm sorry, this is the best platform I could get you today, and that he got NPR and that you're on this. That sucks,
I say that,
man.
I say that more in the sense of like it's like I'm not like breaking any like kind of consent boundaries with like him and his story.
Got it. Yes, I appreciate that.
But so when you are a trans masculine person taking hormone replacement therapy, HRT, it changes your voice, and your voice will drop, and weird things happen in your throat. I'm like gesturing to my throat. I forget that this isn't a visual medium.
It also is.
Oh, nice. But Elliot, he had a fabulous career as a mezzo soprano in the Bay Area, like operatic scene. And when he decided no more, I must do this, he kind of knew it was going to like probably end his like vocal career. And it did, because he transitioned later in life, like I think like 40s ish. And when you do that, everything in your throat, your vocal folds, a lot of that is less elastic. It's very settled. It doesn't have the same flexibility and elasticity as like it might when you are like in your like, late teens, early 20s. I may not be using the exact right like medical terminology, but that's
Oh, that's cool.
vaguely,
I think you're giving
it,
us more of a
it's a
window than
thing.
we would have had
Yeah.
otherwise.
Yeah. We're just, again, I'm a tangential girly. I love just like going on a long story. So yeah, anyway, that happened. Elliot, it kind of ended his career, but then he also had like kind of a long-term fascination with death and things like that. So he got a job in a funeral home. And I was like, well, that's really cool. I also kind of have an interest in this. So we were going to write a piece about a mortician, is what we kind of landed on. And then I did a lot of research, excuse me, to the point where I like very briefly thought, should I go to mortuary school? I think I could be really good at this. But then I didn't, because I didn't want to go to 4 years of mortuary school. So I like, that's this project, the song cycle was kind of the start of all of this. Also, I I also usually write my librettos for myself a lot of the time. I'm like a singer songwriter who writes things that are too complicated for a singer songwriter, because I went to school, and so now I have too many ideas, and it's like it's a mixed meter nightmare. You know,
I appreciate it though, and I think it sounds like at least you're
yeah,
determined to sort through them all. Let me back
yeah,
up a little bit because I
sure,
love this death conversation. I feel like we'll get back to it. Um,
yeah.
when did you start writing music? And
When did I
then
start with music?
maybe the follow up to that too is like, when did you start paying attention really to the craft of songwriting? Because I feel like most songwriters
Sure.
I know, and I know a few, you don't always realize that's what you're
Mhm.
doing at first. And usually
Yeah.
your first experience songwriting is not looking at a staff and plotting notes.
Mhm,
Like
mhm.
that develops. But so when did it start, and then when did it become a little more formal?
Sure. So, I mean, I like super young. The first, like, I was like a, a young kid, like a 5-year old that was always singing, making up songs to themselves. But then
More
like,
so than you were singing other people's songs? Like, were you singing shit
yeah, I
from the
mean, I
radio
don't,
also, or did you do a lot of
I
like
have no
literally coming
idea.
up with your own stuff? Do you remember?
I have no idea. I do not, I wouldn't know.
Okay,
But,
sure.
um, but, yeah. And when I was like in 5th grade, where, like where you have to, 4th grade, I think, when you like, everyone has to play recorder. Um,
Sure.
our final project was like writing a song for a recorder. And we were taught how to, part of that like recorder curriculum is kind of learning how to read sheet music.
Right.
Um, and so I like my friend in 3rd grade was like, "Hey, you should write a piece about these kids who get ground up at a meat grinder factory." And I was like,
What?
"Bet, incredible, yeah." So I wrote an entire suite called the Meat Grinder Suite for solo recorder that like had this wild plot that kind of turned into
Were there
like a
lyrics?
yeah, there's random songs in the middle of it that you just stop playing the recorder and singing. It was a weird.
Tremendous.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
clearly there's
yeah,
something like musically disturbing happening to you
yeah.
early.
It also like ended with like this like kind of like anti-capitalist flair of like, well, the meat grinder factory closed down after the kids died, and then it like tanked the economy of the local town because it
Right?
like relied on it was
Of course, no, of course,
yeah,
Gray. Of
yeah.
course it did. I can't believe how absolutely soaking with death your first piece was. I
Oh
should
my
not be
god.
surprised.
Wow, I haven't put that together. But yeah, so
Just
that's the
dripping
first
with
thing
the
that I
blood
wrote.
of children out the gate. So that's a
Yeah,
cool place to start. And then
yeah,
later you
yeah.
did what? Puppies and rainbows, having fun on the moon or
Um,
something?
yeah, exactly. I don't I love comedy. I respect it too much. Every single thing that I've written has been like very intense and like has made like everybody cry. And I like wish that there was a way. I just need to like take it in improv class or something. But like
Do you know what I think the
I
key
need to
is?
write something funny at some
You just
point.
need to you just need to take the same serious shit that
Yeah.
you've written and give it to incredibly funny performers. Just
Yeah.
cast it differently. And I'm telling you, the best comedy is from performers who are taking dead serious stuff
Oh
way
yeah.
too serious. And then
Mhm.
all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, I actually already wrote 8 comedies. I just was taking it too seriously at the time. You'd
Oh
be
man.
surprised.
Yeah, I'm sure. Honestly, I can see like the absurdity of like do like a home like a very kind of like self-righteous home funeral opera. Could There's definitely humor in there
It could
somewhere.
crush. I mean, I haven't seen your work, but you know, you crush those kids. I don't see why not. So when does it become then though something more serious of I'm
Yeah,
gonna go to school for this. This is my life. This is what I'm doing right now,
yeah. So
100%.
I from what I've listened to the podcast, I understand that you are a musical theater girly as well. Um,
I would say that some people have said that about me.
okay, great, cool. Or at least a theater girly.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I did
yeah,
lots of
yeah.
musicals in high school.
Okay,
Lots and
cool.
lots.
Yeah. So that was me. I love sing. I was like a performer first. But I was in like all the high school musical. I mean, in middle school, I peaked because I like got to play Ryan from High School Musical and one of the first like MTI, like
Right? It must have been brand
school
new.
productions. Yeah, it was great. I went on Radio Disney for it. It was iconic. My
My
head was like,
senior year was Beauty and the Beast.
oh yeah.
So I was just a few
I
years but behind you there.
Oh yeah. It like really like inflated my ego, and I thought I was it. But then I got to high school, and they casted me in all the like comedic relief roles and like the musicals that do not sing. So I was like King Pellinor from Camelot, who like
Mm.
has a dog, and he's just kind of a wacky guy. Um, and like I don't know the rabbi's comedic relief, but I got cast as the rabbi and fiddler, which we were a
Mm.
very Christian high school, and I don't know if we need to have done Fiddler, but
I love when a bunch of Christians do Fiddler, man. It is
there was
offensive in a way, for
I
sure.
know but there was one Jewish who was a friend of mine, but there's like one Jewish student who was in Fiddler, and he was just so upset about how it was being done.
That's
Um,
fair.
yeah, but yeah, so I got all the roles that I didn't want to get. I was gonna be Lancelot, and I was shocked that I wasn't. Um, so, uh, I it kind of like I don't know. I was kind of composing in like my piano lesson some, and so composition became kind of like a B plot for me. It was the
Oh,
B plot that
okay.
became the
That's
A
making
plot.
sense to me.
Um, I like wrote some incidental music for like some one acts that we did in my like theater class in high school. Um, UNCSA connection though. I will say, when I was in high school before UNCSA, I like showed up to like play a kid in a UNCSA like year 4 production of Eugene O'Neill's All Wilderness. Wild show.
I
His only
remember
comedy.
that.
Yeah,
Who
yeah.
do you remember the director of that by chance?
It was a really lovely lady who had long hair, I think. Um, uh,
Oh
uh,
man, yeah, I remember
I
that.
I did check our Facebook mutuals, and you are friends with people who were in that cast.
Oh
Um,
yeah, that was done while I was at
Joshua
school for
Morgan
sure. Yeah.
was in that cast, and that's the
Uh-huh.
only name. And his partner from that theater company that they had was also in that cast.
Brian.
Brian, yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
they've both done the podcast before.
there you go. I haven't talked to them since that production, but they were great.
Well, they were within the
Uh,
last few years, so if you want to know what they're up
nice.
to.
I'll have to go back and check that
Yeah,
out.
Joshua was just on in the fall of last year, or maybe the year before. But yeah, he's doing a new thing where he helps artists get their business lives together. Very smart
I
dude.
need that.
Oh, he's great. I recommend Artist Strategy. It's a School of the Arts thing. As
Mm,
far as the people that founded it, Joshua and Mike are great, and Hasia Muhammad, who also works with them, they're all
mm,
really smart. They're all about like treating your art as a business and being
mm,
smart
mm,
about that. And
mm,
yeah. Anyway,
mm. Yeah,
so we decide we're going to start taking the music seriously because it was a
yeah,
B plot, but then you're
yeah,
like, at what point of your high school did you go to School of
yeah.
the Arts? When did you move?
So so I did like a UNCSA summer intensive for
Yeah.
composition, and that was kind of the gateway drug.
Summer
Um,
session went well for you?
yeah, it was a nice time. It was cute. And then I don't know. And so I decided I was going to apply to UNCSA for like voice, operatic voice, which is kind of a nightmare audition scenario. I just was not prepared. It was very funny. Steve Lacoste was who I also um he is like my opera dad. I also did like a lot of Fletcher. I was like the kid who did a lot of Fletcher stuff when they needed kids.
Right.
I was a part of the same children's chorus that Drake Duffer was in, and this is how all that connection was also happening. Drake
Sure. He
Duffer
was
from a
just on
few
the
episodes
show
ago.
in the
Yeah,
winter or in
yeah,
December, as it were.
yeah. Um, sorry, I'm all over the place, but yeah, I had a lot of UNCSA connections prior. I also did UNCSA. I did the ballet prep program, which is
Oh,
another wild thing. I was a Nutcracker kid. I was an Act One kiddo, which
you were
was
all over campus growing up then.
I was. I was like,
Wow.
I wanted to perform. I really, that's all I wanted
When
to
you
do.
managed to in
Um,
a number of ways
yeah,
before other people were able to. I mean, you're getting on campus as a kid, and so many other
yeah.
people are busting ass just to get on campus while they're paying to be students there. So that's pretty
Well,
impressive. Do you
yeah, it was
mind
real
if I
nice.
ask? Do you mind if I ask when your transition began in this whole story? Like as it relates to your singing voice is my main question, honestly.
But you mean like transition in what sense? Like vocally? Are you talking about gender
I'm
or?
talking about gender as far as like you were talking
Oh,
about
sure.
hormones and how they affect
Okay.
things. Obviously, the direction is not this,
Yeah.
but I just want to ask how that relates to this whole
Hmm.
timeline.
Sure. It doesn't relate to this part of the timeline really. Being trans femme, your voice stays the same. You can't. I mean, you can vocal train it up, but I'm not a woman. And that's not something I desired to be. I just am not a man, and I didn't want to be a dude. Um,
Okay.
uh, but that, but yes, this gender was like a post UNCSA thing. Like I
Okay.
went to college, and I UNCSA was a wow, I'm queer in some way type of thing. It definitely like cracked like the gay slash queer egg.
That
But
hadn't occurred to you before you got to School of the Arts?
I like came out as bisexual like the last month of my junior year in high school, and then I was bi until like the first week at UNCSA where I was like, oh no, it's just about the boys. That's
Got
all.
it.
That's all it's about.
Hey,
Um,
that's the journey for so many.
yeah,
That is
yeah.
definitely the journey for so
And
many.
I still feel a little guilty about that. Like, the whole
Why?
it's like such a well, no, it's like I feel bad. It's a disservice to the bisexuals out there, because that's
I don't
such
take it offensively. I
yeah.
identify
Okay,
as
cool.
bisexual, and that doesn't hurt
Yeah.
my feelings.
But you know how everyone thinks that bisexuals are just like on their way to like one thing or another, like that,
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
fitting
I'm
into negative
married to
stereotypes.
a
Yeah.
completely straight woman.
Yeah.
But
Well,
that doesn't
be
diminish
careful.
my bisexuality.
Incredible.
I
Yeah, of course.
absolutely know what you're talking about, but I also
Yeah,
feel like,
yeah.
and I think you can appreciate this. I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but I
Mhm.
think that we all evolve on how we identify, how we relate
Oh yeah.
to what these words mean to us. I
Mhm.
have not
Mhm.
identified as bisexual. I'm sure you can find recordings of me saying I'm just straight up straight because in my
Mhm.
head, because I didn't want to like date and marry a man, that didn't occur to me as something that I necessarily wanted to do despite attraction or sexual activity with them. I was like, well, then I'm really just a straight guy who like does gay stuff. Like that's how I thought about it for a long
Love.
time because I didn't know
Yeah.
the words to use.
Yeah.
But those words evolve and change. And I think
Mhm.
that that's another thing that I'm really appreciative of. It definitely, when I talk to any of my trans friends about it, it's like the more flexible we can all be to try to figure out what the hell we're talking about, the more we
Yeah.
all win, right? Like that's really the
Yeah.
goal of all
Absolutely.
this. Like, what do
Yeah.
we mean when we say I am this or this is how I feel or what? Like digging into that is the question. That's the game that we all should be up to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I am. It's been kind of just a very, it's been a wild, flexible journey. I think I have occupied probably, I've been so many different genders. Like we've really kind of like run the gambit. I was I like did identify as a woman for like a short while, but it just like it didn't work out for me. It wasn't what I was feeling. But it's so we've like we kind of started. We started over on like one side, on like the dude side, and then like shot over to like a nice middle place, and then we shot over to like woman, and then we kind of like made our way back to the middle, and then we made our way a little bit further back to men, and then we've come back over here, and now it's very funny. And
And see,
I
that's the thing that doesn't like, as someone who grew up in a really conservative place, and I
Mhm.
guess you did as well,
Yeah.
depending on where you were part of town you're at a given time. It's like even in our lifetimes, that has evolved from such a binary conversation because I think even if you played what you just said back to yourself when you were like 14, I don't know,
Cool.
for me, I would be like, wait, what? It
It would have
works
made
that
zero
way?
sense.
Yeah,
I I
it doesn't even occur because you're like, I'm either this or I'm that, or I'm this or I'm that. Like you're really trying to fit yourself into this whole, or well, excuse my language. You're really trying to fit yourself into this category or this box, and really one of the things that I love, and I wish more people would kind of meet all the communities at, which is like it's not permanent. Like things
Mhm.
change and feelings
Mhm.
change, and especially when you grow up thinking things are so binary,
Mhm.
of course you're going to evolve and change and it doesn't
Mhm.
even have to be the
Exactly.
same it
And
was 2 years ago.
And a lot of the change a lot of it, and I'm sure there are some linguists out there that will correct me, but a lot of it is like the evolution of language that we have access to and like what is popular language to talk about gender has like thus like shaped our understanding of what it is. Like I
Right.
was a non-binary person for many years before someone ever like said or texted the word MB to me, ENBY.
Mm-hmm.
And when they texted that to me, I was so confused when they said that, "Oh, you're such a cool MB," and I had no idea what they're talking about. And this was like another trans person. But yeah, like it's the like language has been such like a incredible vehicle for discovery for and like just like growth and like the gender queer sexuality journey,
Right.
um which is so nice.
Which also
um
makes America a unique place to experience any version of non like heteronormative
mhm,
life, which is that, and I've talked to people about this on the podcast recently who are from other countries and people whose first language is not English, especially not American English.
mhm,
American English is so special in that more so than maybe any other language in history, it aggressively seeks to better adjust to the circumstance of what that person is trying to communicate.
and
When any other language almost throughout all of human history looks at a word or a situation and finds that it doesn't properly fit it or whatever, it's like, whatever, these are the words we have. Good luck.
yeah,
American English looks at every situation through its people and goes, is there another word we could use that's better than this for that? Like
Mhm.
at the end of the day, once we get all the way down these paths, there's really two versions of that thing. So are we using this word accurately when we describe both of them this way? Like, and other languages to this day, Spanish, Italian, they don't do that. They're old languages. They don't have a million words for, I think, what was the example? It's a girl from Brazil gave me. She was like, we're talking in Portuguese and you just say bread. Like you just say
Totally.
bread. And then you look at the bread and then you deal with what kind of bread it is later. But in America, is it a cupcake? Is it a muffin? Is it a scone? Like you have to get so nitty gritty, but it's such a particular thing for people who are trying to identify themselves to live in a place where the language is almost trying to keep up with them as they
Yeah.
identify who they are.
Yeah.
You see what does that make any sense?
Oh no, totally. Yeah. I mean, and it's there. I am not. I am not like a queer
I didn't mean to
theorist or queer academic.
flabbergast you.
No, 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 no,
Like
no.
I didn't.
But there's so many like wonderful. I love a video essay. I love a YouTube video essay. There's so many like wonderful like rabbit holes to go down to like learning about like the history of Tumblr and neopronouns and like Tumblr and like the like kind of like the like
I
hyper
bet.
specific genders and like all these weird things that like frantic young people, and when I say this I mean like frantic like 12 to like 16-year olds were like doing on Tumblr to try to find themselves, but it was happening at a rate so quickly that they were creating language and then like immediately discarding it, and they're like many like micro gender or not micro, but they're like many hyper specific like gender identifiers that have like don't have like any record of being used other than like one Tumblr post out there.
Come and
Um,
gone
but
in the
it's like
night.
in but it's like coming out of this adolescent like sense of agency and newness and confusion that like all these things come from, and then eventually they
That's always
settle.
been there
Yeah,
as long as
yeah,
there's
yeah,
been people. But then these people have access to this specific.
yeah. The internet really did some wild shit for gender and
Yeah.
sexuality for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And I think all for the better, frankly, because even the more extreme things, like sometimes I see some people talking about pronouns or talking about gender identity in a way that even I mean, I'm I like to think of myself as progressive and open minded. I'm certainly not like lacking in LGBT people in my life. Like, but even when they describe what they're talking about, I have to be like, what? Like, I'm here for it. Wait, I think, but what are you even saying? I'm like, I've lost track of it. But I'm not, that doesn't upset me even
Yeah.
so. And it doesn't even push me away necessarily. I don't automatically like adopt it or agree with what they're saying if I can't get it. But it doesn't push me away because I'm like, whatever it is, we're doing the work. We're figuring it out. And that's what the whole cool part about this is, because there are people all throughout history who have been trans or non-binary or this or that, whatever words we're currently using in 2024, and they didn't have access to those words, and so they were just different, or they were just
Yeah.
weird, or they were just whatever word they had that
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
So I love seeing the work done. That's just one of my favorite things, because I think so many people are afraid to change things because they're worried the things they love will get destroyed. But man, it's brave shit to go out there and
Yeah.
try to change the words. Am I wrong? Like, that's a
Yeah,
crazy
no,
thing to
it's
go out
so
and
cool.
change the words. In France, it's like against the law.
That's wild.
You
France.
can't change the words. They're the words.
Oh,
I love this. I wish we had
yeah.
like so much more time. I'm gonna have to cut it a little bit short, but
Oh yeah, we're almost to the end.
we're getting there, and I feel like we've gotten to all these cool places that I would love to
Oh
crack
yeah,
open more with you at another time.
all
I'll
good.
definitely have you back. What is you mentioned some of the stuff you've recently been working on. It definitely seems like the track, as we often talk about, for people, some people, the last person, I just had an interview earlier today, and I don't know when it'll be out, so I don't want to be too specific, but I talked to someone who started at School of the Arts doing vocal performance in the music school. Now they work in post-production and editing in film and television. You seem a little bit more like you're headed down that track in a maybe different way, but you're still writing music, you're still
Yeah.
singing, you're still putting that stuff together. Does it feel to you like you're still at kind of the beginning of a very lifelong journey with that? Or
Oh,
is
of
that
course.
your
Well,
immediate future only? What do you think?
well, I mean, I'm also like, I'm a marketing girly because I am not like a person who can support themselves as an artist fully. So we're like doing arts nonprofit stuff. But yes, absolutely. I've spent too much time. I've invested too much time and energy into being an artist. The thing that I'm coming back around to more for being a composer is coming back around to like being a performer. Yes, I absolutely did write a role for myself to like do like an evening link performance where I bury my partner, because I wanted to perform more. And it's been really delightful and really lovely. Um, Becoming a theater person again, and like in the sense of like I'm moving away from like opera and just kind of like just moving into the in between space of whatever combination of music and
People in room
theater it is.
watching performer.
Yeah,
Period.
exactly. It's been really nice.
I love
Like
that.
now theater makers back on the resume as a header. It's a
Right.
great time. And I really like it. So it's yeah, that's where we're going. That's where we're going to continue to go. I have a I've been a part of a real quick so I can get all the things and
Please.
I'm a part of an organization called Fifth Wall Performing Arts, which is based in New York and Michigan, and like that's like all we do is like create new experimental theater that's kind of in that like genre indie space. We have a show coming up in New York with the Contemporaneous ensemble. They're like a chamber orchestra. That's like a chamber rock opera that has a lot of prog rock vibes and a lot of heavy grooves, and it's really weird. It's very postmodern. It's like my friend coupled together his journal entries and my poetry and his old like voice memos. He's a percussionist, so like voice memos of grooves and stuff, and like my old discarded arias from the Gray opera that I mentioned, and like slammed it together in a piece based on ideas, and about moments of transition, things like that. So that's coming to New York in June. So yeah, we're still performing, and it's great and it's really lovely. So yeah, we're doing art.
Ray Grant, I'm gonna say thank you. I gotta head, but I
Yeah,
really gotta say thank you as well. I really appreciate your
word.
candidness and openness and talking about all this stuff, and also fascinating. I find you to be a
Yeah.
fascinating
Oh,
person.
well,
So
thanks,
thanks
Rob.
for that. Thanks for being fascinating, because otherwise these are very dry episodes.
Oh, I could talk on and on and on. Thanks so much. This is such a pleasure.